The international terminal at Los Angeles Airport in the morning was always a symphony of bustle. The steady roll of suitcase wheels, the loudspeaker echoing passenger names, and sharply dressed business people hurrying with hot coffee in one hand and ringing phones in the other. Amid this rhythm of motion, Johnny Depp appeared, a man who didn't blend in with the rest. He wore a slightly wrinkled black long-sleeve shirt, faded jeans, and old sneakers with worn heels. On his right wrist, hidden beneath the fabric, was a faint silver cross tattoo, the only thing on him that seemed to carry meaning. He walked slowly, his small suitcase trailing quietly behind, like a shadow amidst the frantic crowd. No one paid attention, but when he stopped at the first-class priority gate, the scene around him seemed to pause for a beat. Sleek black leather seats, uniformed staff in pristine attire, and elegant passengers swiping their priority cards like a familiar ritual. And then there was him, a man who didn't fit this polished space. He waited his turn, his eyes slightly weary as if he'd been on too many flights, his left hand gripping the suitcase handle, his right hand relaxed, revealing the tattoo peeking out from under his sleeve. Lisa, the attendant at the check-in counter, quickly scanned the ticket he handed her. The name Johnny Depp stood out clearly, but she frowned. No sunglasses, no fancy watch, no entourage. He didn't match the image of a star she'd seen before. "You're flying first class?" she blurted out, her voice stiff. Johnny gave a faint smile, his deep brown eyes unwavering. "Yes, I am." Lisa scanned the ticket, the green light confirming its validity, but her 10 years of instinct told her something was off. She glanced at his wrist, the small, faded silver cross tattoo, unassuming yet striking enough to make her pause. She knew who Johnny Depp was, but his simplicity threw her off, as if he didn't belong in this glossy environment. She handed back the ticket, her voice still rigid. "All right, you can go through." Johnny walked down the corridor, his old shoes making soft steps on the floor. Lisa watched him, her gaze lingering on the small tattoo, a symbol of authenticity in a space of pretense. For the first time that day, her instincts failed to draw a conclusion, leaving only a growing question mark with each step he took. Johnny sat quietly in seat 2A, the plane having settled at cruising altitude. The afternoon sunlight filtered through the window, casting a glow on one side of his cheek, highlighting the faint wrinkles at the corners of his eyes. Marks of time and years spent away from the spotlight. He didn't read a book, put on headphones, or select an in-flight movie. In front of him was a dark screen and an untouched meal tray. He simply sat there, hands resting on his lap, his sleeve slightly rolled up to reveal the faded silver cross tattoo on his wrist. Simple, silent. Lisa moved lightly down the aisle, holding a tray of drinks, her eyes scanning each row of seats. When she reached Johnny, she paused. The stillness emanating from him caught her attention. Not uncomfortable, but enough to make her feel an invisible distance. She placed a glass of water on his small table without a word. Johnny nodded in thanks, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. Lisa turned away, unsettled, the feeling unlike anything she'd experienced with other first-class passengers. She had encountered loud ones, demanding ones, or those who treated flight attendants like machines. But Johnny was different. His silence wasn't cold. It was a presence that didn't need to prove itself. At the back of the cabin, a passenger complained, "The seats are a bit tighter than usual." Lisa returned to her duties, but her gaze kept drifting back to seat 2A. It wasn't because she feared he'd cause trouble, but because she wanted to understand what lay beneath that quiet stillness. Something she'd never seen in anyone in this polished space before. The flight passed smoothly, but in Lisa's heart, something felt unsettled. She stepped out from the galley, approaching seat 2A where Johnny Depp sat. This time, it wasn't to serve water, but driven by an urge she couldn't ignore. She lowered her voice, professional yet clear. "Mr. Depp, I'd like to ask a small thing. We recommend limiting the display of personal tattoos in the cabin. Some passengers have raised concerns in the past. Could you pull your sleeve down for the sake of general harmony?" Johnny looked up, his gaze gentle but focused. He paused for a moment, not out of irritation, but as if weighing her words. "Do you think this tattoo makes someone uncomfortable?" he asked, his voice low but not cold. Lisa hesitated. She didn't dislike tattoos, but in the first-class cabin, where everything was controlled, appearances pristine, a personal symbol sometimes felt like a crease on smooth silk. "It's just, we try to maintain a neutral environment," she replied, then felt a pang of unease at her own words. Johnny nodded slightly, pulling his sleeve down gently. Not rushed, not reluctant, just a courteous gesture. "It's fine, I understand," he said. "I'm used to not everyone wanting to see all of who I am." Lisa stood still. His words, not sharp, not laced with hidden meaning, felt like a mirror reflecting back at her. An inescapable truth had just been spoken. In that brief moment, she was no longer just a flight attendant. She was a person facing another, a man unafraid to reveal himself, even through a small tattoo. She turned back to the galley, her steps slower, her heart quietly asking, was the harmony she'd been taught to uphold truly fair? Lisa returned to the galley after her brief conversation with Johnny, her hands still clutching the tray of drinks, her heart restless. Through the gap in the curtain, she saw him sitting quietly in seat 2A, his gaze fixed out the window, the faded silver cross tattoo on his right wrist clearly visible under the overhead light. No passengers complained, no one paid attention, but the unease within her continued to grow. What was it about this man that kept her eyes on him? It wasn't his fame. She had served plenty of celebrities before. It was his stillness, so starkly at odds with the bustling pace of the first-class cabin. She stepped out, standing beside his seat, and spoke without a clear reason. "You still haven't pulled your sleeve down." Johnny turned to her, his voice gentle. "No one's complaining, right?" Lisa hesitated. He was right, but the unease wouldn't dissipate. "No, but I think this might cause a misunderstanding." Johnny tilted his head. "A misunderstanding about what?" Lisa didn't have an immediate answer. That tattoo, a small faded cross, felt like a quiet voice amidst the silent crowd. She had been trained to handle every situation, but this moment didn't fit into any protocol. There was no argument, no violation, just his unyielding presence. She saw Johnny's gaze, steady, unprovocative, yet unyielding. "I'll make a note. If someone raises a concern," she nodded slightly. Johnny nodded back. "Do what you feel is necessary." Lisa turned away, her steps slower than usual. For the first time, she wasn't sure where the line between regulation and instinct lay. Lisa stood in the galley, her hands trembling slightly as she entered a note into her tablet. Passenger 2A, personal symbol, non-compliant with concealment request. No disturbance caused. Everything followed protocol, but the feeling in her chest was offbeat. She glanced through the curtain gap. Johnny still sat calmly, his gaze out the window like a quiet pause amidst a stream of data. She had once had a tattoo on her shoulder, removed after a business-class passenger commented it looked unprofessional. She remembered the sting of being judged for something no longer there, an invisible scar. Now looking at Johnny, she wondered, was she doing the same to him? She stepped out, approaching him, her voice lower than usual. "You know, tattoos can sometimes make people see you differently." Johnny tilted his head, listening silently. "They look at it and decide who you are, without even asking," Lisa continued, her eyes wavering. Johnny nodded slowly. "I'm used to being seen, but not to being seen through prejudice." Lisa took a deep breath. His words were like a small knife, not painful, but sharp enough to make her aware of the crack in her professional mask. "We're asked to maintain harmony, but maybe, sometimes that's just an excuse to exclude," she admitted, her voice softening. Johnny didn't respond, but his gaze softened. At that moment, they were no longer flight attendants and passengers, but two people facing each other, each carrying a scar no one else could see. Lisa didn't ask for anything more, only saying, "Thank you for being patient." Johnny gave a slight nod. As she turned to walk away, the entire first-class cabin seemed quieter, not because of words, but because a truth had just been acknowledged, a truth that shook the prejudices Lisa had once thought were right. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin of the flight departing Los Angeles grew tense as a passenger in seat 2A raised their phone to record, whispering to their companion, "That tattoo doesn't belong here." Lisa, standing a few steps away, overheard and felt the pressure mounting. She had asked Johnny Depp to cover the small silver cross tattoo on his wrist, but he refused, his voice calm. "It's my memory. I'm not hiding it to please anyone." Lisa clenched her hands, her voice rigid. "If you don't cooperate, I'll have to report this." Johnny looked at her, his deep brown eyes unwavering, but the air around him began to feel heavy. Another passenger chimed in. "She's right. First class isn't the place to show off tattoos." Whispers spread, and Lisa felt the tension rising. She turned, hurrying to the galley to report to the captain. Captain Hayes emerged from the cockpit, his calm demeanor standing out amidst the growing tension. The soft cabin lights illuminated his silver hair, his sharp yet kind eyes scanning the passengers. He approached Johnny, his voice low. "What's going on here?" Lisa quickly explained. "I asked him to cover his tattoo, but he refused, and some passengers have complained." Hayes looked at Johnny, the small silver cross tattoo glinting under the light, unassuming but carrying its own weight. He asked, "Do you intend to disturb anyone?" Johnny gave a faint smile. "No, I just want to sit quietly on this flight." Hayes nodded, his gaze shifting to Lisa. "Has he caused any trouble?" Lisa fell silent, her lips pressed tight, unable to find an answer. Hayes stood tall, his voice firm. "I see no issue here. He's not causing a disturbance, nor threatening anyone." Lisa opened her mouth to speak, but the captain's look stopped her. Hayes turned to Johnny. "Thank you for staying calm." Johnny nodded. "Thank you for listening." Hayes walked away, but the cabin's atmosphere remained heavy. Lisa stood there, her eyes on Johnny, her heart weighed down. She began to wonder if she was the one in the wrong. The flight continued to glide silently through the white clouds, but within Lisa, a storm was brewing. She stood in the galley, the dim lights casting a glow on her dark blue uniform, her hands gripping the edge of the counter tightly. Her phone in her pocket buzzed incessantly. Videos of the incident between her and Johnny Depp had gone viral on social media, but she didn't open them. What unsettled her wasn't the public's opinion, but a moment she had just witnessed. Johnny, seated in 2A, had stood up when an elderly passenger nearby dropped their meal tray. He bent down, picking up each spoon, wiping the floor with a napkin, and said gently, "It's okay, let me help." The passenger thanked him, their eyes lighting up with gratitude. Johnny returned to his seat, his sleeve still rolled up, the small silver cross tattoo glinting under the cabin lights, a quiet reminder of his sincerity. Lisa watched from a distance, her heart heavy. That small act jolted her. The man she had asked to hide himself was the same one who helped another without a second thought. She recalled his gaze when she requested he cover the tattoo. Not angry, not judgmental, just sincere. A memory surfaced, her father's warm, deep voice. "Don't let prejudice cloud your vision, Lisa." She stepped out of the galley, her eyes fixed on Johnny. He sat calmly, his gaze out the window, his composure making her uneasy. She had thought she was right, that asking him to cover his tattoo was about maintaining order, but now she saw differently. The rigidity within her began to melt, as if the shell she had built over years was cracking. She wasn't as impartial as she thought. She had imposed her own prejudice on him, and now she couldn't deny it. Lisa returned to the galley, her heart weighed down. She knew she had to do something to make amends, not because of the video, but for herself. Captain Hayes stepped out of the galley in the first-class cabin, the cabin lights illuminating his silver hair as he held the microphone, his deep voice resonating through the speakers. "This airline respects every passenger's right to personal expression. We do not enforce rules to conceal tattoos unless they impact safety." His words were brief, but their weight shifted the atmosphere in the cabin. Passengers looked up from their seats, their eyes tinged with surprise. A man removed his headphones, his gaze drifting to Johnny Depp in seat 2A with a mix of curiosity and admiration. A woman whispered to her companion, "Is that Johnny Depp?" The speaker fell silent, but Hayes's words lingered in the air, like a gentle breeze easing the tension from before. Johnny sat still, his sleeve rolled up to reveal the small silver cross tattoo. His eyes fixed out the window, showing no reaction to the announcement. His silence now felt more powerful than any words. A passenger who had been filming earlier lowered their phone, their eyes reflecting a hint of appreciation, as if they had just witnessed something greater than a mere confrontation. Lisa stood at the back of the cabin, her eyes wavering as she heard the announcement. Her dark blue uniform felt heavier, her hands gripping the edge of the galley counter. The captain's words struck her rigidity like a blow. She had been wrong to impose rules on Johnny, and now she couldn't deny it. She stepped out of the galley, her gaze locked on Johnny, her heart heavy. The tattoo on his wrist, small, faded, now felt like a quiet declaration of freedom. She stood a few steps away, her eyes softer, as if the captain's announcement had opened a door she hadn't expected. She knew she had to do something, not to make amends in front of the passengers, but to face herself. Lisa stepped out of the galley, the cabin lights casting a glow on her dark blue uniform as she approached Johnny Depp. The hum of the engines droned outside, but inside the cabin, a heavy silence prevailed as she stopped in front of seat 2A. Johnny sat there, his sleeve rolled up to reveal the small silver cross tattoo, his deep brown eyes calmly gazing out the window. She took a deep breath, then suddenly knelt before him, her trembling hands resting on her knees, her voice choking. "I was wrong, Mr. Depp. I thought I was maintaining order, but I was only holding on to prejudice. I'm sorry." The passengers fell silent, a few gasps echoing as all eyes turned to them. Johnny looked at her, his gaze free of judgment, quietly observing her for a moment. He stood, his steady hands reaching out, taking hers and gently helping her to her feet. His voice was warm and low. "You don't need to fix anything. You've already faced it." Lisa looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks. She felt her heart lighten, as if the shell she had carried for years had melted under his sincere gaze. "I didn't realize how wrong I was. I was just following the rules," she whispered. Johnny gave a faint smile. "Rules aren't always right. Sometimes they hide what matters more." His words echoed through the cabin, silencing everyone. A passenger raised their phone, capturing the moment, the flash flickering in the dim space. Lisa wiped her eyes, her gaze meeting his, and she said, "Thank you. I didn't expect to be forgiven." Johnny nodded. "I don't hold on to anything. You've stepped beyond yourself, and that's enough." Lisa stood there, her tears stopping, her eyes brighter, as if she had just rediscovered something she'd long lost. 2 weeks later, Lisa sat in her small Los Angeles apartment, the faint sunlight streaming through the window, illuminating the old wooden table. She held a small silver cross tattoo, a replica Johnny Depp had drawn for her after the flight, its faded shimmer glinting in the natural light. She turned on her phone, her eyes bright as she began recording a video, her voice soft. "I used to think control was order. I lived behind rules, behind a uniform. But he taught me that freedom is living true, understanding rather than imposing." She paused, her gaze drifting, as if revisiting that moment on the plane. When she knelt to apologize and Johnny lifted her with a sincere look. "I thought I was strong because I kept everything in check, but he showed me that strength is letting go, seeing others as they are," she continued, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Thank you, Johnny. You didn't just forgive me. You showed me I could be different." She placed the tattoo on the table, the sunlight making it shimmer like a vivid memory. "I learned that freedom isn't forcing others to be like me. It's accepting them, understanding them, letting them be themselves," she said, her eyes gentle. "Living true doesn't require anyone to change. It only asks us to change how we see." The video ended, and Lisa sat quietly in her apartment, the sunlight brightening her face. The silver cross tattoo was now a symbol in her heart, not of religion, but of freedom and compassion. The lesson echoed. Living true means opening your heart, not boxing others into your mold. Viewers on social media watched her video, their eyes lighting up with understanding. Lisa's story wasn't just an apology, it was a journey of transformation, from prejudice to acceptance.